have a common language. You know this, right? Anybody that's got kids, got grandkids, you know that there's kind of a language, phrases, words that they use frequently. In fact, I'm for sure that when you were a kid, you used many of these phrases. And now that you have kids, if you've got grandkids, you've heard these phrases many times. Are you ready? Tell me if you've never heard this phrase before coming out of a child's mouth. Are we there yet? Right? You're taking those trips. Are we there yet? How much longer? There's another one. How about this one? And this happens a lot on those trips. He touched me. Or, she's breathing on me, right? She's in my space. Or this one, I love this one. You've said it, I know you've said it, your kids have said it. It's not my fault. Yeah, so you have heard that one before too, right? It's not my fault. You're an only child. It has to be everybody else. How about this one? I'm bored. Have you ever heard that one? I'm bored. It usually comes out with I'm bored. Or I'm hungry. You ever heard that one? I'm hungry. There's food. You could have whatever. You could have everything in the cupboard. You just went grocery shopping, right? Got food on the table, and you'll hear, I'm hungry. How about this one? This is my all-time favorite right here. But Mom said, or the one that complements that often, usually used in the same day, but Dad said, right? Because if it don't work for Mom, it'll surely work for Dad. Here's another one that you've probably heard frequently. In fact, you may have just heard it on your way to church this morning. That's not fair. You heard that? That's not fair. In fact, can I suggest this to us? That is one that often sticks with us throughout our lifetime. Doesn't it? That's not a phrase that we tend to outgrow once we hit puberty. It got real quiet, which means I either struck a nerve or it's just me. That throughout our life, even as adults, there are times when life doesn't seem to be fair. Right? That there are times that it never seems like maybe you don't have the money to do the things that you want to do that maybe another family has. And whether you've said it or not, you have had this attitude that that's just not fair. That maybe they take more vacations than you do. And you go, that's just not fair. I work hard. Or maybe their vacations don't get rained out. And you find yourself going, it's just not fair. Or others get promoted or get raises and you get looked over, passed by. It's not fair. Maybe your kids never seem to behave or show you love like other parents' kids do. You go, man, I got duds. I don't know what's wrong with my kids. I got duds. It doesn't seem fair. My life doesn't seem like their life. My family doesn't seem like their family. Maybe something more significant. Maybe you've found out that you have a sickness or an illness or disease. Maybe you're young. Maybe you're old. It doesn't matter. But it just seems like, it just doesn't seem fair. Why me? Maybe your house or your car isn't as nice as someone else's. Let's be honest. There are so many times, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many times, if we were honest, that we look at our lives and things happen to us and circumstances happen, or they have happened, or maybe we're in the middle of it right now and we just go, man, it just doesn't seem fair. Life just doesn't seem fair. It's not happening for other people, or at least we don't think it is. And it just doesn't seem right. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Jealousy seems to be one of the most common emotions that I have experienced when I have found that life isn't fair. I look at my life and it just doesn't seem to be as good or as nice or whatever as someone else's. And when jealousy starts to stir up, the next thing I know, an attitude in me starts to develop. I want to take you back for a moment to my elementary school days. we had one boy I remember in our class, and I was in like 3rd grade. I remember it pretty distinctly, but I don't remember his name. I couldn't picture him right now. In fact, maybe one of you, I don't know. But I don't know anything about him, but I remember in 3rd grade distinctly this boy, that he was one that everybody kind of seemed to like. At least it seemed like all the girls liked him anyway. You know, and all the teachers seemed to like him, and you know, he seemed to be kind of great, but none of us boys seemed to like him for some reason. You know, it just didn't seem fair. He got all this attention, like he was kind of the you know, the big kid, I guess, on campus. I don't know. It just didn't seem fair. And one of the reasons could be, as I look back when I think about it now, one of the reasons could be that he had like perfect hair. And I want to share something with us that some of you may not know. You didn't live during this time. Others of you may remember this. That when I was in elementary school in the late 70s, then you know throughout the 80s, this happened as well. Guys carried combs with them all the time. Some of you remember what I'm talking about? And not just any comb, not just a little tiny comb, but a huge, big pocket comb, like 3 feet in diameter. I mean, this thing was massive. That we would take and they'd put in their back pockets and it would stick up like this far out of the pocket. You know what I'm talking about? Some of you know what I'm talking about. In these 70s days, this is a big thing, and you would see, you'd carry that comb around, and all day long, throughout the day, you'd whip that thing out and you'd comb through your hair and put it back. Well, this was that kid. And like I say, the only thing we figure is all the girls like him must be because he's got this perfect hair, he's always combing, he's got this perfectness about him, and it had to do with that hair and that stupid comb, and a little jealousy come into my 3rd grade mind, and there had to be this sense of envy, and there kind of was this sense of it's not fair. We don't get the attention of guys. We're not get the attention that he gets. And I remember, I'm not proud of it, but I remember as a 3rd grade child, I remember one day getting a hold of his comb. I don't even remember how I got it. I don't know how I got it. I don't know if I may have literally taken it from his pocket. I mean, again, this thing was so big you could be in the next zip code and still reach it. I mean, they were huge. Or he might have dropped it, he might have left it on his desk. I have no idea how I found myself in the possession of this comb, but there it was. And I remember distinctly, again, I'm not proud of it, I'm not boasting here, but I remember walking home from school that day, and I had this comb thinking, what in the world am I going to do with this comb? And I came across a body of water. It was some kind of pond. It wasn't it might have been a drainage ditch, in a 3rd grader's mind, but it was this body of water that was there. And I remember taking this comb and flinging it and skipping it across that body of water to see how far it would go. I'm not proud of it. If you're missing your comb this morning when you woke up, don't blame me, all right? I'm a changed man. I've changed my ways. I no longer do that. But I remember, and jealousy was a part of it, and part of it was this idea that life just isn't fair. Why does he get all the attention and we don't? Why are all the girls all around him and oohing him? And as a 3rd grade, you hardly one of the girls doing, all around you. They had cooties, in 3rd grade and all that. But still, there was this idea that life is, how come I don't have, and that kind of, and even today, if I see somebody with nice hair, I don't get all upset about it. But even today, there are times in my life, and my guess is the same as with you, that jealousy still rises up in me. And there's still times in my life when I find myself, even if I don't say it, and there's been times, I'll admit it, that I've said it. I'm a recovering addict in this way. That I've even said those words, that life just isn't fair. So what do we do? What do we do when that happens? Because so often it happens and it becomes an endless cycle. It becomes a philosophy. It becomes a mindset. It becomes, before long, if we're not careful, every time we turn around, that everything that happens that doesn't go our way gets labeled unfair. Everything that happens that just doesn't go the way we hope it goes ends up with this thought coming back into our mind, oh, well, here we go again. Just my luck. See, life isn't fair. And before long, if we're not careful, we've developed an attitude and a mindset that I'm not for sure that God is extremely pleased with. But it's something that we struggle with. How do we get past that? Over the next few weeks, what I want to do is I want us to do a study together. I want to look at a character in the Bible, a person that actually literally lived. His name was Jacob. And if you've got your Bibles, I want you to turn there, because I want you to see Jacob he knew about unfairness. He'd been down that road. But Genesis chapter 25 is where his story begins. And I want to take some time reading that today. So I'm wondering if you'd join me in Genesis chapter 25. If you're in the church Bible, it's going to be page 17. I mean, we're right in the very beginning of the Bible. This is one of the first stories that we really read about the nation of Israel. In fact, Jacob becomes pretty significant to this story. Genesis chapter 25, verse 19 is where we're going to start. So if you could just take a moment and find that, we'll wait for you just a moment. But I want you to keep in mind as we read through this, especially today as we read through this, that Jacob is the good guy in the story. All right? If this is your first time you've heard the story, first time you've listened to this, it may seem at first that Jacob is not the good guy. He is the good guy. All right? He ends up being the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. All right? I mean, he's critical to this nation of Israel that God puts in place and calls his chosen people. Throughout Jewish history, God will be known as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, and that's this Jacob that we're going to be talking about. But as he starts out, as we begin seeing his life here, his life, kind of like my life as a third grader, starts out a little questionable. All right, he didn't, you're going to see he didn't throw any combs in the lake, but there's some things here that we he's got a deceiving attitude about him. In fact, his name Jacob actually meant heel catcher, and we're going to look at that in just a minute, why he got that name. But heel catcher, kind of at the grasping somebody's heel, like I'm right on them, I'm there, and literally meant a trickster or a con man, all right, a rascal, right, a scoundrel. All right, this was not a compliment. In other words, all right. Hey, what are we going to call him? We're going to call him a con man. Okay, this was not necessarily a great name to have, but Jacob, and I apologize if your name is Jacob, but we're going to see this. He's going to live up to his name of trickster, scoundrel. Here, you're going to see this. But I want us to look through this. Chapter 25, verse 19. Are you with me? Now we're going to read a good little bit, so if you don't have it there in front of you, just really listen pretty close. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old. He married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel. There's a bunch of names there. Verse 21, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless, and the Lord answered his prayers, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies, you see the plural there, right? The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, why is this happening to me? In other words, what is going on? So she went to the Lord to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord gave her this answer, you pregnant with twins. Well, I mean, he didn't put it that way. This is what he actually said. He said, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Now keep in mind, in this culture, in this society, the oldest, right, was like, I mean, that they inherited everything, and the oldest had a special place in the family. Right? I mean, we all know how many right now are oldest children. Just raise your hand. Just if you're an oldest child, right? We know we're the best, right? Yeah. So okay. Younger ones, if you're a younger one, raise your hand. You're the youngest child, raise your hand. Yeah, the babies. Hi, babies. You're the one that understands this life isn't fair more than the rest of us, right? I'd asked about Mel once, but nobody cares. I'm just kidding. I know you felt that way all your life. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Okay. So, sorry about that. He just got back from vacation. You'd think he'd be nice. Okay, so verse 24. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau, which means hairy. I don't know why they just didn't call him hairy, but I'm on a roll today. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob, which means heel catcher, heel grabber, right? So in other words, Esau come out first. He's the oldest. He's the firstborn. He's the great child. He's it. Perfect child, right? Like all of us firstborns are. But the second one's going, hey. In other words, wait one cotton picking minute. I don't know if he said that. I don't know if I'm not allowed to say that or not. But he grabbed his heel. And he said, wait. And he's trying to, he's right on his heels, okay? And so they went, we're going to call him Jacob, heel grabber, right? Con man, trying to get ahead, trying to take advantage of somebody, trying to sneak his way in, trying to slip in there first. No. Boy, you're second, all right? You're the baby. I mean, that's pretty much what's going on here. Got that? All right, so where are we at? So verse 26, after this, his brother came out, his hand grasped Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. So the boys grew up, as boys do, and Esau became a skillful hunter and man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Do you see what's starting to form within these two boys? You got daddy's favorite, the oldest, and you got mama's boy, right? Who's not out hunting and doing all that crazy stuff. He's just home. He's with mama. He's the baby. He's getting taken care of. And then, okay, so just so we know where we're at there with what's going on. So verse 29. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, please, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. That's why he's also called Edom, which means red. And so since he was red, he loved red stew. Maybe red was his favorite color, whatever. They nicknamed him Edom as well. Okay. But Jacob replied to him this, first, sell me your birthright. Now, just so we understand what a birthright is a double portion of inheritance bestowed upon the oldest child. So while each child would get an inheritance, the oldest perfect child would receive, rightfully so, the double inheritance. Right? I'm not making friends with my second and third children. They also were entitled to become the head of the family, the spiritual leader, the patriarch of the family upon the passing of the father. Right, so kind of while we joke about this, a little bit, in this culture, this was pretty serious. The oldest child had the rights to the family. They were the patriarch of the family. And so Esau comes in, he's famished. He's probably exaggerating a little bit, but, he's just famished. He's going, baby Jacob, give me some of this stew that you're making. Jacob says, on one condition, you sell me your birthright. You let me be the head of the family. You let me be the one that gets the double inheritance. You let me be that. Sell me your birthright. Esau's kind of going, yeah, whatever. Just, I'm hungry. Dude, just give me something to eat. And so he purchases for a bit of stew his birthright. Verse 32, look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is the birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and he drank and then got up and left. Esau despised his birthright. So we're going to look into that passage in just a minute, but I want you to kind of really see, make sure we understand what's really going on here. To Esau, it just didn't matter. Right? Esau was Maybe he was the spoiled child or whatever. It's just like, whatever, Jacob, I don't care. Just give me some food. But my guess is most of Jacob's life was centered around this birthright. Most of Jacob's life was centered around this idea that yeah, I know you're the oldest, but only by seconds. Yeah, I know that you're daddy's favorite, but I just about got out first. I know that you're going to be the one that inherits this birthright, but I was so close. I was so close. I had your heel. If I could have just somehow snuck past you. And my guess is that for most of Jacob's life so far, they're just young. They're young boys. They're teenagers. They're young men. For most of his life up to this point, though, that in Jacob's mind, he had been obsessing over this birthright. This isn't something that just popped into his head the last minute. Oh, I wonder what I could get from Esau for this stew. Hey, birthright sounds good. My guess is most of his life he was obsessing about this idea that he missed it by this much. That many seconds, that close. And my guess is that most of his life he had been doing and thinking and conspiring at what could happen if only I could get a hold of this. What could I do to somehow obtain this birthright? And here is his opportunity. Because, up until this point, life has been unfair to Jacob. I want us to skip over to chapter 27. Not that there's not good stuff there in verse 26, but to pick up our story with Jacob and Esau, chapter 27. We see a little bit later in their life as their father is getting older. Verse 1. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his oldest son, and said to him, "My son." Esau responded, "Here I am." And Isaac said to him, "I'm now an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and your bow, go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare for me the kind of tasty food that I like. Bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die." My guess is that probably Esau probably didn't even address this with his dad. "Oh, by the way, Dad, I sold my birthright." I mean, to Esau, he just kind of like, "Dude, it's just Jacob. I'm not worried about it." It came a point in Isaac's life where he realized that, I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to live, and my son Esau is going to receive his birthright. He's going to become the patriarch of the family. So before I die, I would like to give him a special blessing. I'd like to place this upon him. In other words, let's do this now and not just wait till after I die. I want to be able to physically place a blessing upon him. So he calls his son in and he tells him that he's getting ready to bless him, and so he sends him out to fix a meal for him. And so verse 5, we see that Rebekah, Jacob and Esau's mom, was listening. And as Isaac spoke to his son Esau, Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back. Rebekah said to her son, her baby, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare some tasty food to eat so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now listen, my son, listen carefully. Do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats." You don't have to go out in the field hunting them down. Just go out in the pen and round up a couple of the flock and bring them in so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring him down a curse on myself rather than a blessing." It's not so much that he was concerned about the morality of what he was about to do. He was concerned about getting caught, right? What if I get caught? It'll end up being a curse, not a blessing. So his mother, in verse 13, said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me, not on you. Just, good old mama coming to his rescue. I got your back, son. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me." So Jacob went, got them, brought them to his mother. She prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house. She put them on her younger son Jacob. She covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. And she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. He went to his father and said, My father. Yes, my son, he answered. Who is that? Jacob said to him, It's I, Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you've told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. Isaac asked his son, How did you find it so quickly? You just left, my son. The Lord your God gave me success, he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not. So Jacob went closer to his father Esau, Isaac, who touched him and said, The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau because of his mother's plan there. So he proceeded to bless him. But then he kind of was questioning this a little bit. Are you really my son Esau? He asked. I am, he replied. He lied. Then he said, My son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing. Jacob brought it to him, and he ate, and he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, Come here, my son, and kiss me. So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, and remember, were really his brothers, Isaac blessed him and said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you. May people bow down to you and be Lord over your brothers. And may the son of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. A really awesome blessing for that day. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food, brought it to his father, and said, My father, please sit and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. His father Isaac said, Uh-oh. He said, Who are you? I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau. Isaac trembled violently and said, Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came in, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and a bitter cry and said to his father, Bless me too, my father. But he said, Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. Esau said, Isn't he rightly named Jacob, the deceiver, the con man, the scoundrel, that rascal who was jealous of me and felt that life wasn't fair, so he did this deceitful act. He says, This is the second time he's taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. What an interesting story. What a story. And I want us to look at this. I want us to dig into this. And I want to learn some things from this. And we're going to learn some things over the next few weeks. We're going to continue to read a story. I encourage you to go home and read a story in advance. Next few weeks, few days. But I want to take up time and dig into what we just read, this portion of the story so far. And I want to see that there's some things that we can learn from Jacob's story. And here's where I take some notes. And we're going to process through this. And then here's what I'm going to do. At the end of our message today, I'm going to ask us to come before God in prayer today. And to join up front here to lift up our prayers, our cries to God. So be ready for that. But I want us to learn something from Jacob's story. First and foremost, I want us to see this about Jacob's story. Understand that his story is not a how-to guide for when life is unfair. I do want us to see that. This story we read, as in many stories from the Bible, they're not prescriptive. In other words, it's not prescribing, okay, this is what you're to do. And sometimes it can be easy to look at a story we'll come across a passage of Scripture and think, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. And at first glance at this story, if we're not careful, this is what we could learn from the story. We could learn, hey, when life gets unfair, and it was unfair for Jacob, I mean, he missed it by this much. When life gets unfair, then all we got to do is lie, cheat, and steal to get what we want. That's not what we want to learn from the story. Okay? I mean, it's not a prescription for this is what you're to do when life is unfair. Just like a lot of other passages of Scriptures we look at, we don't want to read them as a prescription. In fact, in Hosea, it says this, that the Lord has a charge to bring against Judah. He will punish Jacob according to his ways and repay him according to his deeds. Did you see that? That Jacob will get punished. He's being punished. He will be punished for his deeds and for the things that he's done. And he goes on to say, in his womb he grasped his brother's heel. As a man he struggled with God. So Bible's acknowledging this is not the way to go. Okay? So I want to make sure we do capture that and we do understand that this is not a how-to guide for when life is unfair. Instead, this is a descriptive story. It describes something about life or about God, and often it's a description of how not to do something. But we've got to be careful that we don't pull a story or a verse out of context and use it as a daily guide for living just because it's in the Bible. Right? Remember our fake news series a few months back? Right? We just got to be cautious about that. So to begin, I want us to know this is one of those times. And in fact, let me encourage you to be here over the next few weeks as we go through the story as often as possible so you can see the whole story of Jacob. Right, this is one of those times. It's not a how-to on what to do when life is unfair. However, instead, it does show God's sovereignty despite life's unfairness. And let me explain sovereignty here, because it's kind of a big word we don't use a lot, but to be sovereign means that you're one who has supreme power or authority. We believe that God is sovereign. He has supreme power. He has supreme authority over all things. In other words, God's will be done. Amen. Now, I want us to understand this because that, we think about that, but then we also think about free will. God has given us free will. Each of us has the ability to choose those things that we want to do. We have a choice, right? God just doesn't manipulate us like puppets. We're not puppets on the string that God just does whatever. We're not pawns in his great chess match. We have free will to do as we want to do, but ultimately God is sovereign. He is in control. He is all-powerful. Amen?
Amen.
And it's kind of a holy mystery how God can be both sovereign and allow free will. But as we look at this story and we see it, as we go through this story, one of the things we can learn from this is that it shows God's sovereignty even when life is unfair. And this is what it means for us. Our circumstances, your circumstances, my circumstances, the things that we have that seem to be unfair. And we all have those things, right? Some of us, it's just our DNA, it's our genes, right? I found out just recently that I got type 2 diabetes, probably from eating way too much junk food when I was a teenager and was younger, right? And that's what I think. And I thought, well, I'll try to exercise. I'll try to eat better. And I spent a number of months trying to eat better, do right. And I went back and my doctor went, nope, blame daddy, right? Blame the genes, blame the DNA. It's just part of who we are. And we look at that, we have certain things about our DNA and who we are, our personalities, that we don't have much control over whatsoever. It's just who we are. We have things that we've been born into, circumstances we've been born into, and we have no control over that. You have no control over where you were born, who you were born to, who your siblings are, when you were born, what part of the country you were born in. You have no control over any of that. You realize that, right? I mean, none of us sit around at night going, if I only had tried harder, maybe I could have been born somewhere else. I mean, it don't work like that. We have no control over that God is sovereign. So our circumstances, whatever our circumstances are, whatever we have been born with, that we have found ourselves, that we have no control over, I want us to hear this. Our circumstances do not disqualify us from being used by God. Amen. He is sovereign. He can use us no matter what. Did you hear what I said? Because for some of us, we look at our lives and go, yeah, well, if only I was born in a different time or a different place, or if only I had different parents, or if only I had this or that, if only I wasn't born so poor, or if only I wasn't born so rich, or if only I was born whatever, then maybe God could use me differently. Now, your circumstances are not dependent. It's not dependent on how God uses you, and does not disqualify you. Your circumstances, God is so sovereign, He can use anyone at any time for any purpose. And so the story that we're looking at as we dig into this a little bit more, to realize that your circumstances, whatever it is that you say, life just seems to be unfair, God is able to use those circumstances for His purpose.
Amen.
He's greater than your circumstance. He's greater than what's going on in your life. He's greater than all of the things that you look at going, this doesn't seem fair. God says, no, listen, I've got this. I've got this. And sometimes it doesn't seem like God has. And sometimes we look at it going, God, if I was you, this is how I would do different. And God says, that's why you're not me. Right? Because we had this plan that we map out for ourselves. And God says, yeah, but that's not the best plan. I know the best plan. I know what is best for you. I'm all powerful. I'm all sovereign. I got all the authority that I've got this. I know what's going on. And we'll see throughout this story that God had this. And He had Jacob. And He had this whole story under control. Another thing that we're going to see, we're going to learn is this. Well, let's look at this passage here. It's in your notes. It says, "What then shall we say?" This is a passage in Romans. Is God unjust? Is He unfair? Not at all. He says to Moses, I'll have mercy on whom I have mercy. I'll have compassion on whom I have compassion. It does not therefore depend on human desire or effort, but it depends on God's mercy. It really doesn't matter. On one hand, what we do, God's going to work things out. He is all sovereign. Another thing, though, we see is this, that His story portrays perseverance and redemption in the face of life's unfairness. He says this a little later in Genesis, and we'll read this in a little bit. You've struggled with God and with humans, and yet, Jacob, you have overcome. The thing about our life, and when life seems to get unfair, is as we look through this story, one of the things we can learn from this is we've got to persevere. We've got to hang in there. We've got to not give up. God's not giving up on us, so let's not give up on ourselves just too quickly. Let's not give up on God too quickly. Let's persevere. Let's hang in there. If we truly believe He is all powerful and He's all sovereign and He's got all authority and He's got this, then let's hang in there. Let's persevere. Let's wrestle through this, because God's got something in store for us. And the redemption part of this is that at the end of the story, there's redemption. At the end of the story, we're going to see Jacob wrestled with life, but in the end, God truly blessed him. He persevered and didn't give up. And the same is the same for you. There's redemption heading your way in your story as well. God has not given up on you. Don't give up on yourself. Here's what I want us to be the big point of today, the big idea that I want you to see today. Is we cannot control our unfair circumstances. We can't control them. You have no control over your family dynamics or those things that happen to you from birth. There's some things that have happened to you in your life that you can't control. Nobody sits around home willing themselves not to have cancer. Nobody sits around at home just willing themselves not to have life issues and struggles and go, as long as I pretend it doesn't happen, it won't happen. I mean, life happens, and sometimes it seems unfair to us. We can't control those circumstances. But we are responsible for how we respond to them. Right. We're responsible for how we respond to those circumstances, to the things that come our way. And Grant, as we look at this story, we see it, and a great illustration of this is Jacob. Jacob didn't handle it the best. I mean, look at this. He's Bible says, Jacob, you're going to be judged for this. This was not what you should have been doing. You did wrong. And there's some things in our life that we look back on and we're sorry for, we regret. We look back on our life and go, man, if only I'd done things different, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And we look at how we've responded in the past and we kind of beat ourselves up over it. But we've got to realize that yeah, we're responsible for that. We've got to own our stuff for the things that happen in our life. But God also looks at us, and as new things come our way and new things happen to us, and we look at it going, man, this doesn't seem fair. God says there is a way to respond to this, that you're responsible to that, and you do have some control over your response to your unfair circumstances. One of the biggest things that may seem to me, at least to me it does, the most unfair is something we're all born with. It's called inherent sin. You know, we all are born with something deep down inside of us that causes us to rebel, to have an attitude of pride and sinfulness. The Bible says all of us are born with that. And it says, because Adam and Eve sinned against God, the very first humans that were created sinned against God, that there was this inherent nature, this sin nature that was born into each of us from that point forward, that as we're born, we're just born with this. And I don't know about you, but that just even seems unfair, right? Even before we're born, or as we're being born and we come into this world, before we even do anything wrong, we've got this nature within us that's bent towards doing wrong. It's kind of like, man, the deck is stacked against us before we're even born. And we have this inherent sin, this sin that we really don't have any control over. It's our nature. It's being human. It's being rebellious against God. But we can have a response to that. See, Jesus was given as a sacrifice in our place so that we can come before God, and while we were considered guilty because of the sin that's within us, we can trust in Christ and that sin can be forgiven and we can have that nature removed. We can have that cleansed from us to where we become, the Bible says, just as if we've never sinned.
Amen.
Just pure and clean. And we come to God with this, okay, we don't have any control over this inherent sin, but we do have control and responsibility over our response to it. And one of the most important decisions we can make in our life is to come before God and ask for forgiveness of sins and ask for our life to be turned around for a fresh start. In that same way, throughout life, as we hit these situations that just don't seem fair, if we look at this and go, man, there's not much we can do about that situation, but we can respond to those situations. A couple things I want to share as we begin to wrap up here today is this. A couple things I see Jacob did not do. One of the things that he did not do in this story is he did not assign blame or make excuses. And for so many of us, that's so easy to do. For so many of us, we have this attitude of life just doesn't seem to be fair, and we point fingers, we place blame, and again we say it was my parents' fault, or their parents' fault, or this or that, and that's why we are like we are, and that's why we do. There may be some legitimacy to that. It may be because of the culture we grew up in that we've inherited some of those behaviors, but we've got to, in order to get past this mindset of life's not fair, but God is good, and He's sovereign, He's got this. To get past that mindset, we've got to stop assigning blame, pointing fingers, and making excuses. Because for so many of us, so many times, the reason why life is so miserable for us is because we've been too busy stewing on what happened to us when we had no control over those things. Well, if only my mother would have treated me differently. If only my dad would have loved me. If only this would have happened. If I would have only gone to this school. Or if I could have only gotten that job. Or if this would have happened to me, then life would be different. And we stew on those things that all of our life then has this mindset and philosophy of life isn't fair because of those things. No, life's just not fair sometimes. Life just happens sometimes. But God's got control of it. Amen. God's sovereign over it. We cannot continually point fingers and place blame on what someone else did or how something affected us or how our life has been burning down because of those things. We can't play the victim in our life if we want to break free from the life is unfair mentality. We've got to break free from that, and we've got to leave that victim mentality behind. That's not to say that when things happen to us that we don't go through a period of mourning and grief, and for all of our lives, when there's a loss in our life and life is unfair and life gets hard. I mean, there's years and decades, and I mean, it's a process to work through and go through. I'm not saying just get over it and move on. I'm not suggesting that. But we can't just continually place blame on, I would be different if. Because every time we play that game, we lose. Every time. Every time we play the game of, if only this would not have happened to me, then I could be doing this, or I could have this, or this is how my life would be different. Every time God looks at us and says, no. My child, I've got you.
Amen.
I've got you. Sure, there's some things that you cannot have helped. Sure, there's some things that others have done to you that have not been fair. Sure, life has happened to you and things. But yeah, Jacob couldn't help that he wasn't born first. He had no part of the decision concerning his name. I mean, imagine growing up all your life. There's the con artist. He couldn't help that his mother babied him. He couldn't help his life situation, his dynamics. And there comes a point in our life where we have to acknowledge that we can't blame other people for our lives.
That's right.
So maybe you didn't have the best childhood growing up. Maybe you were treated unfairly by your parents. Maybe you grew up poor. Maybe you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth. Whatever it was, maybe you were picked on as a child. Whatever the excuses are that you can think of, I want to challenge us and encourage us to let's still say, you know what, it's not because of that, but thank God it's because of God that I am where I'm at.
Amen.
And God's got something so much better than the circumstances that I've been facing. And these circumstances that I'm facing, He's bringing about in my life, and He's doing something that I don't even understand just yet, but something incredible is happening in my life. And so instead of just sitting here pointing fingers, I'm going to trust You that You know what You're doing.
Amen.
And it may be a mess that I'm in right now, but I'm going to do what I know I can do. I also notice that Jacob didn't do this. He didn't accept his circumstances as his destiny. He didn't sit around just going, well, that's just the way it is. And for some, especially if you're dealing with an addiction of some sort and you've placed blame on family for your addictions, a lot of people struggle with this, saying, well, you know what, because my dad was an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, and then the next line is this: I guess I'll always be an alcoholic.
That's what you say, brother.
Or my mom was this, and I've noticed these traits in my life, and so therefore, since my mom was and I am, I will always be. And you just fill in the blanks. Whatever the blanks are in your life. Jacob didn't accept his circumstances as his destiny. Well, I'm the baby child. I'm never going to get. I guess I'm always going to be mama's boy. I guess no. I mean, he didn't accept it. He didn't go about it the right way. But he didn't allow his circumstances to determine his destiny. And I want us to hear that today as we start this out. That next week we're gonna see God make Himself more known to Jacob, and Jacob's going to decide to follow God's direction, which is much better than his own direction in things. But as of right now in Jacob's life, his understanding of God is pretty limited. Pretty limited. But he did the best that he could do to make sure that he wasn't just going to wallow in his destiny. I guess is what I'll always be. Instead, what Jacob did is he acted upon God's promises the best he knew how. And for you, God has made promises to you. If you're a child of God, if you have come and had your sins taken away, like I spoke earlier, and you've become a child of God, God looks at you and He says, listen, my child, you have a destiny. You have a plan. There is something that I'm putting in your place, and it's a little messy getting there. And there are going to be some circumstances that in your life don't seem fair at different times, but trust me, and trust in my promises, and let's take steps forward to move in that direction and act upon who I say that you are.
Amen.
Certainly Jacob, at this point in his life, he knew the promise that was given to his mom. I'm sure Mama told him probably time and time again, "Oh, Jacob, let me tell you, you're my baby. I got to tell you, God, this is what God told me. The older will serve the younger." I'm sure he heard that time and time again. Jakey, I don't know if she's called Jakey or not. Just work with me. Jakey, one day the older will serve. And God's promised me that. He's told me that. And I'm sure he didn't know what all that entailed. He wasn't sure what God had in store for him or how it all play out. But he knew there was a promise from God that he would one day be blessed by God beyond measure. And when I say this to you, whatever your circumstances are, whatever it is right now that you find yourself going back to going, it just isn't fair. I understand it's a natural response. We've all been there. I get that. But can I encourage you to think differently? That instead of life isn't fair, and things would be different if, would you begin to think, I'm a child of God.
Amen.
And God has something for me. And in order to get there, I've got to go through this. These circumstances are all part of a sovereign God. All part of His plan to get me to where I need to be. So it's not if only this had happened, but because this has happened, God is shaping and bringing about a plan in me to bless beyond measure. God's got something for you. He's got something for you. And I want to encourage us and I want to challenge us. We can't control our unfair circumstances, but we can be responsible for how we respond to those circumstances. And I'm for sure that even if you don't know what that means just yet, I want to encourage you and challenge you to not give up on God's plan for you. In just a moment, we're going to worship and we're going to sing. The worship team is they're going to come up and they're going to lead us in a final song. We're going to wrap up for today. We're going to go back to our lives. We're going to go back to do those things that we have to do for today. But I don't want to leave too quickly. Because I know for some of us, even what we talked about today may have even just kind of struck a nerve. And some of you may be like, I can't believe you've even said those things. Hang on, just pause just a moment. I understand your circumstances. I may not understand fully because I may not have gone through what you've gone through, but I understand that life just stinks sometimes. It seems so unfair. But my question for you is this: how are you going to respond to it? And what I want to encourage us to do is this. I want to encourage you to join us this morning. We're going to worship team. We're going to have the worship team just go ahead and come on forward because I want to speak to you for just a moment. And what I'm going to do is I want to invite each of us that are here to join us up front here as we close out today. And I want you to bring up front to the front here. There's nothing special about this, but it's a matter of us realizing that we're not in this by ourselves. What I spoke about today is something we all are wrestling with. To take that thing that you've been wrestling with, that this just isn't fair. Maybe it is a sickness or an illness. Maybe it's something that happened in your life. Maybe it's an addiction that you're dealing with because your parents have dealt with it. And you kind of feel it's just not fair. It's in the genes. Maybe whatever it is that you have been saying, life just doesn't seem to be fair. I want to invite you to come and bring that forward to the altar here today. You don't have to kneel, you're welcome to, but just to come and stand here as we sing, as we worship, to get ready for us corporately to come together. And Bill's going to lead us in a prayer for us in our lives, in our situations, in our circumstances, to realize that these circumstances we face, it's not random, it's not just happened to us, it's happened to us because God's got something in store for us. It's part of His plan. And to be willing to bring that circumstance and say, God, this is what I think seems so unfair right now. but I'm giving it to you, and I'm asking that you would put the pieces together in my life in such a way that, God, I may truly be blessed. That you may use me the way you want to use me. That I may have a deeper faith and trust in you as I just let this go. That you don't allow your circumstances any longer to disqualify you from this journey of faith that we're on. That you're not allowed to disqualify you anymore from God doing something incredible in your life. I want to invite you today, as we sing, to come forward and listen. I know that there's many of us in this room that you understand what I'm talking about. Listen, you've got this unfairness, that something has crept in, something that is on your mind even now as we've been talking. And I want to invite you to come and join us so that, listen, there should not be just one person standing up here by themselves. The reality of it is we should all be up here. Amen? As we bring that before God, as we worship in faith, believing that God's grace is amazing, and He heals us, and He brings and puts the pieces of our life back together. God, and Pastor Bill said, going to lead us at the end of that song in a time of prayer. So would you stand with me? Would you just stand and as we sing, join us as we sing, but move forward. Let's begin to move forward. And let's fill this altar. Let's fill this space up. And let's worship from up here today, prepared to give to God that unfairness.